Okay, let's just dive right into this, shall we? Welcome to today's explainer. We are going to be taking a really hard, unfiltered look at a reality that, well, most of us are living every single day. I'm talking about our modern obsession with hustle culture. We live in this world that is constantly demanding we optimize, produce, and achieve. We're told that absolutely every moment must be maximized. But what if this relentless drive is exactly what's destroying us? Today, we're going to explore the world through the lens of philosopher Byung-Chul Han. We'll be digging into his profound philosophy of inactivity and looking at why doing absolutely nothing might actually be the most radical act of rebellion you can commit right now.
So seriously, take a second and ask yourself honestly, are you exhausted by your own endless potential? Think about your own lived experience for a moment. We all feel that deep-seated burnout and fatigue, right? You finally sit down to watch Netflix on a Friday night, and instead of feeling any sense of relief, your brain immediately starts running a to-do list. It starts guilt-tripping you for not, learning a new language or starting a side hustle while you watch. Why does trying to rest always seem to come with this massive, heavy dose of guilt? Why do we feel like we're literally failing simply by existing without some sort of productive purpose? Section 1. The Achievement Society, from Obedience to Auto-Exploitation. To really understand this constant burnout we're all feeling, Byung-Chul Han offers a pretty radical diagnosis. He argues that we've undergone this massive, almost invisible shift in how society operates and, crucially, how power is exercised over us. In the past, as the thinker Michel Foucault described, we lived in what's called a disciplinary society. It was a world of thou shalt not. Think prisons, factories, strict rules. The guards were external. But Han says that era, it's over. We now live in an achievement society, which is governed entirely by the word can. The guards are no longer outside of us. They're in our heads. They're our smartphones, our fitness studios. We are completely ruled by this illusion of boundless opportunity. And that brings us to a genuinely terrifying concept, auto-exploitation. We are now both the master and the slave, all rolled into one. I mean, the factory owner doesn't need to whip you anymore because you whip yourself. You meticulously optimize your diet, you track your sleep cycles, you force yourself out of bed for that absurd 5 a.m. hustle grind, and you do it all under the guise of self-improvement and freedom. But Han points out that we are trapped in our own personal labor camps because this so-called freedom is actually the most highly efficient form of control ever invented. Think about it. You can't exactly rebel against an oppressor when the oppressor is you. Section 2. The Violence of Positivity. Now, this internal drive doesn't look like your classic historical oppression. It looks bright, it's enthusiastic, it's optimistic. But Han calls it the violence of positivity. You probably know the symptoms all too well. It's that intense pressure to always say yes, to take on just one more project, to view your actual personality as a brand that constantly needs to be optimized. This isn't just harmless ambition. It's a systemic violence disguised as empowerment. When every waking second has to be productive, even our downtime gets weaponized. We take a power nap just so we can work harder later. We meditate purely to increase our focus for the boss. So, when society relentlessly tells you that nothing is impossible, what happens when you inevitably fail to reach perfection? You can't blame a boss or a rigged system because, hey, you're a free entrepreneur of the self, right? So, you blame yourself. You turn all that aggression inward. And this autoaggression, according to Han, is the absolute root of modern depression and burnout. This is perhaps one of the most chilling insights in all of Han's work. The first stage of burnout is actually euphoria. We throw ourselves euphorically into our work and our projects. We love the grind. We feel so alive. That is, until we inevitably collapse under the crushing weight of our own impossible expectations. The enthusiasm itself is the trap. Section 3. The Alchemy of Profound Boredom. So, if this hyperactivity and endless toxic positivity are the disease, Han introduces a cure that might feel a little uncomfortable at first. Profound boredom. And I don't just mean waiting in line while checking your phone. I mean deep, unadulterated, empty time. Right now, we live in a constant state of hyperattention. We're just constantly jumping between tabs, texts, and tasks, with basically a zero-tolerance policy for stillness. But the cost of that is immense. We completely lose deep attention, that immersive, contemplative state of mind that is the absolute prerequisite for wisdom, for meaning, and for genuine creativity.
The philosopher Walter Benjamin put it absolutely perfectly when he said, "Boredom is the dream bird that hatches the egg of experience." True creativity and our ability to integrate our experiences into actually meaningful stories requires this profound boredom. When you are constantly consuming data and information, you are never generating your own authentic thoughts. You just have to let the noise settle.
Think of it this way. If sleep is the peak of physical relaxation, then deep boredom is the peak of mental relaxation. When we flee from unstimulated time by constantly obsessively scrolling our phones, we think we're just avoiding a negative feeling. But really, we are running away from the exact space where our authentic selfhood actually emerges. We are absolutely terrified of being alone with our own minds, so we just drown ourselves in the digital swarm.
Section 4. A Palace in Time, the Power of the Sabbath.
If we are going to survive this, we have to structurally reclaim this lost time in our lives. We have to rebuild the boundaries that the achievement society completely tore down. Right now, practically all our time is profane time. It's just endless labor and optimization. Even our weekends are often just treated as time used to recover so that we can labor again on Monday. But sacred time, the true festival or the Sabbath, is entirely different. It's not just a battery recharge so we can work harder tomorrow. No, it is a fundamentally different sacred state of being. It's time that just stands still. Han draws a lot on the thinker Abraham Joshua Heschel here, who beautifully described the Sabbath as a palace in time. The Sabbath, or the genuine festival, is almost like an architectural technique for time itself. It acts as a hard stop, a sacred suspension of that endless hamster wheel of productivity. It reminds us that creation isn't just about working. Creation is actually only complete when it fully incorporates rest. And really, this is the entire function of rituals. Rituals are to time what a house is to space. They literally make time habitable for us. They act as anchors, creating this shared rhythm of renewal. In our hyper-accelerated modern world, rituals resist the logic of efficiency because they aren't about producing anything at all. They're just about being. They are what makes sustained, meaningful human connection even possible. Section 5. The Politics of Idleness. We really have to stop viewing inactivity as some sort of personal failure or laziness, and instead start viewing it as a political strike. Han firmly believes that our society's obsession with the Vita Activa, the active life of endless, almost hysterical production, is actively destroying us and the Earth. We have got to urgently reincorporate the Vita Contemplativa, the contemplative life. By learning to linger, to pay deep attention to things, we open ourselves up to the true and the beautiful, avoiding what Han sees as the very real impending planetary burnout. So this brings us to the practice of strategic idleness. And to be clear, this isn't about just being lazy. It is a deliberate, highly conscious resistance to the impossible demands of constant availability and self-optimization. It's about withdrawing your voluntary participation from the attention economy altogether. It is you consciously choosing to step off that hamster wheel and flat out refusing to quantify your existence. Han points to Herman Melville's famous literary character, Bartleby the Scrivener, as kind of the ultimate symbol of this. When asked to do his work, Bartleby simply replies, "I would prefer not to." He doesn't yell, he doesn't start some violent revolution. He just exercises this incredibly passive yet radically powerful form of resistance against the totalitization of work. He exercises the sovereign power of the negative. Reclaiming your life means you have to set hard boundaries. Say no to constant optimization. Outright refuse the demand to reply to emails instantly. Actively embrace useless time that produces absolutely nothing of economic value. Your sovereign capacity to pause and exist completely without purpose is your absolute greatest weapon against auto-exploitation. Which leaves us with one final, pretty essential question. What will you refuse to do today? How are you going to carve out your own palace in time? Because true freedom doesn't come from doing more, it comes from the sovereign capacity to stop. Reclaim your time, reclaim your boredom, and reclaim your humanity. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really highly recommend diving even deeper into Byung-Chul Han's incredible work if you found this interesting. Until next time, give yourself permission to just be.
You know that feeling at the end of the day when you finally just sit down on the couch and this crushing, almost physical exhaustion just washes over you?
Oh, yeah. Like your bones literally ache.
Right. Your bones ache, your brain feels like static, and all you want to do is absolutely nothing. But then almost immediately, before you can even really exhale, this bizarre little voice creeps into the back of your head.
I know exactly the voice you mean.
Yeah, it whispers that you should probably, be doing something. Like you should be answering those 3 lingering emails or listening to a self-improvement audiobook at like 1.5 speed.
Or at the very least, organizing your calendar for tomorrow.
Exactly. You are utterly depleted, yet you feel this sharp, weirdly specific guilt for wanting to simply exist in a state of rest. I mean, it feels like you're running on a treadmill that just keeps speeding up, yet you're the one holding the remote control, just constantly mashing the increased speed button.
It is a profoundly modern sensation. And it's a complete paradox when you really think about it.
It really is.
We're a society running on fumes, like completely depleted by our daily lives. Yet our exhaustion is matched only by our compulsion to just keep moving.
Yeah, it's wild.
The guilt you're describing, it isn't a natural human reflex. It's a highly conditioned response. I mean, we've basically been trained to view our own fatigue as a personal failure.
Like a momentary lapse in our endless journey toward, self-optimization.
Precisely. The exhaustion we feel isn't just physical. It's a structural, systemic fatigue.
And what fascinates me is that we rarely stop to question the origin of that guilt. We just sort of accept it as the cost of doing business in the modern world.
We just try to life hack our way out of it.
Right. We buy ergonomic chairs, we download productivity apps, we drink green juice, all in an attempt to run faster on that exact same treadmill. But we never ask, well, who built the treadmill? Or why are we the ones holding the remote?
We aren't just tired, we've been psychologically colonized. Psychologically colonized by a culture that demands infinite growth from finite human beings. So today, to understand how we voluntarily walked into this invisible prison, we really need to look at the work of the philosopher Byung-Chul Han.
Yeah, his work is absolutely essential right now.
We're specifically focusing on the frameworks he lays out in his books, Vita Contemplativa and the Burnout Society. This deep dive is really a mission to figure out why this hustle culture is actually a trap.
And Han offers just this radical critique of our current reality. He basically argues that our cultural obsession with constant productivity and, endless self-improvement and boundless positivity, it's actually a highly sophisticated trap.
The trap we set for ourselves.
Exactly. His core thesis is that modern society has effectively turned us into voluntary participants in our own exploitation. Like, we are no longer oppressed by an external force.
We oppress ourselves.
You oppress ourselves, and we do it under the banner of freedom and self-realization. Okay, let's unpack this, because to really get to the bottom of this dynamic, we need to trace the evolution of control. Like, how did we get to a point where we are policing our own rest?
Right.
Because Han doesn't just look at the present. He contrasts our current society with the ideas of the French philosopher Michel Foucault. And before we jump into the modern hustle culture, I think we actually need to make sure we understand Foucault's model of society, because it sets the baseline for everything that follows.
Yeah, that's a crucial starting point, because if you look back at the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Foucault analyzed what he termed the disciplinary society.
The disciplinary society. Okay, what does that look like?
This was a world governed entirely by negative power. So power was something exerted upon you from the outside.
Like an external force.
Right. Think of the dominant institutions of the industrial era. You had prisons, military barracks, massive factories, madhouses, hospitals. The architecture of these places was specifically designed for surveillance and control.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Foucault famously used the concept of the panopticon.
Oh, right, the prison design.
Exactly, a prison design where inmates could be watched at any moment by a central tower. And because they never knew exactly when they were being observed, they were forced to internalize the rules.
Well, the control was highly visible. You knew exactly where the boundaries were, and you knew who was enforcing them. It was a world constructed around the phrase, thou shalt not.
Thou shalt not, yes. The disciplinary society was driven by the negativity of prohibition. The grammatical modal verb of that era, if you want to look at it that way, was should or must.
You must do this, you shouldn't do that.
Right. It was a system of strict commandments and laws. You must arrive at the factory at this time, you must not step out of line, and if you broke the rules, you were punished.
It was very black and white.
Very. The power was subtractive. I mean, it took away your freedom, your time, or even your bodily autonomy if you disobeyed. Han points out that the categories of people produced by this negative society were criminals and madmen.
People who transgressed the boundaries.
Exactly. Those who transgressed the established boundaries and were consequently locked away in those physical institutions. The oppressor was a highly visible external force.
You could see the prison walls.
You could see the walls, you could see the armed guards, you could identify the factory boss who was docking your pay.
That makes intuitive sense. Like, if someone is standing over you with a clipboard or a baton, telling you what you cannot do, the power dynamic is incredibly clear.
Extremely clear.
But Han argues we don't live in that world anymore. Like the institutions of control have changed completely. If you walk through a modern city today, the dominant architecture isn't the factory or the asylum.
Not at all.
We're looking at fitness studios with floor-to-ceiling windows, gleaming glass office towers, sprawling shopping malls, and, high-tech genetic laboratories.
And with that architectural shift comes a massive fundamental psychological shift. This is where Han calls our current era the achievement society.
The achievement society.
Yeah. The control is no longer exercised through the negativity of should or must. It is now exercised through the relentless, overwhelming positivity of can.
Of can, like, yes, we can.
Think of the phrases that define our era, right? The slogans plastered on athletic wear and corporate office walls.
Yes, we can. Unlimited potential, be your best self. Just do it.
Just do it, exactly. We have moved from a society of obedience, where you basically just followed orders, to a society of achievement, where you're expected to constantly surpass your own limits.
Let's test that, though, because if we look closer at the architecture of the digital platforms we use every day, a completely different picture emerges than what Foucault described. Let's take a platform like LinkedIn.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
LinkedIn doesn't force you to optimize your profile under the threat of physical punishment. No one is sending the police to your house if you don't endorse your former coworker for synergy.
Right, there's no LinkedIn jail.
Instead, the platform offers you the opportunity to unlock your potential. It seduces you with the promise of a better career, a wider network, more visibility. So are we basically living in a world where the cage is invisible just because it's made entirely of opportunities?
That is the exact mechanism of the achievement society. Han argues that this positive power, the power of can, is infinitely more efficient and, honestly, insidious than the negative power of should.
Because it doesn't look like power.
Power is always most effective when it operates quietly. If you want to control a population by forcing them to do things against their will, you have to expend a massive amount of energy.
You have to build the walls.
You have to build thick stone walls, hire thousands of guards, constantly monitor the populace for rebellion, and crucially, oppression breeds resistance.
Naturally.
If you're forced to work 16 hours a day in a coal mine, you know exactly who your enemy is. You can point to the mine owner. You can form a union. You can go on strike. You can riot. The friction is completely obvious.
But if you seduce people with the illusion of limitless freedom, the friction disappears.
You seduce them with freedom, and they subordinate themselves willingly. The shift from should to can is a total revolution in the technology of social control. You cannot rebel against your own opportunities.
Wow. You cannot resist your own potential.
Exactly. The system doesn't need to force you to work until midnight. It just needs to convince you that working until midnight is how you actualize your dreams, how you build your personal brand, how you prove your worth.
The external oppressor vanishes.
It vanishes, and it's replaced by an internal drive that is honestly far more demanding than any factory boss could ever be.
Which opens up a terrifying line of thought. If the external oppressor is gone, who is doing the exploiting? Like, if there is no factory boss cracking the whip, why are we all so utterly exhausted?
And this is perhaps his most famous concept. We are the ones exploiting ourselves.
We are exploiting ourselves.
We have become both the master and the slave in one single body.
To understand the philosophical weight of this, we have to contrast it with classical frameworks, right? Like traditional Marxist and Hegelian thought. We need to unpack those to see just how radical Han's departure really is.
Definitely.
In the classical Marxist view of industrial capitalism, there is a very clear structural distinction between the classes. You have the bourgeoisie, the owners of the means of production, the exploiters, and there is the proletariat, the working class, the exploited.
Right, the factory owner extracts surplus value from the laborer.
And the laborer alienates their time and body for a wage. The exploitation happens between two completely distinct entities.
Yes.
But I need an ELI 5 for the Hegelian side of this, though. We hear master-slave dialectic thrown around in philosophy a lot, but how does Hegel actually frame that dynamic?
Well, Hegel's master-slave dialectic is essentially a story about the struggle for recognition.
Okay.
In his framework, two independent consciousnesses meet, and they engage in this life and death struggle to prove their ultimate freedom. The one who fears death more surrenders and becomes the slave.
And the one who risks their life becomes the master.
Right. But the irony of Hegel's dialectic is that the master becomes entirely dependent on the slave's labor to interact with the physical world.
Oh, because the master doesn't actually do any work anymore.
Exactly. While the slave, through their actual work and transformation of nature, eventually gains a truer sense of self-consciousness and reality. But regardless of the outcome, the core of both Hegel and Marx's frameworks relies on an external oppressor.
There are always two distinct parties in a dynamic of domination.
Yes.
Right? It's what Han calls allo-exploitation, exploitation by another. The master exploits the slave. The bourgeoisie exploits the proletariat. But Han argues that in our modern neoliberal society, that entire class dynamic has basically collapsed inward. It is imploded.
Everyone is now an entrepreneur of the self. We carry our own personal labor camp right inside our heads.
That is such a grim image. Our own personal labor camp.
It is, but it's accurate. We have internalized the capitalist logic so completely that it is basically indistinguishable from our own personal identity.
Like you are the CEO of You, Inc.
You are the CEO of You, Inc. You are simultaneously the master giving the orders, demanding higher output and better metrics, and you are the slave executing those orders, feeling the physical and mental toll of the labor.
Han calls this auto-exploitation.
Auto-exploitation. And it is devastatingly efficient because, as we discussed with the LinkedIn example, it masquerades as freedom. When you are exploiting yourself in the name of self-realization, you don't recognize it as exploitation.
You view it as personal growth.
Exactly.
But hold on, I have to push back here.
Sure.
If I'm the boss of myself and I'm the worker, why don't I just give myself the day off? Like if the cage is purely internal and I hold the key, why is this internal cage so much harder to break out of than an actual physical factory? If I realize I'm tired, I should just be able to say, hey, You, Inc. is closing for the weekend.
Because your self-worth has been entirely coupled to your productivity. In the disciplinary society, the worker could leave the factory at 5 p.m. and the exploitation ceased for the day. Their identity outside the factory was their own.
But in the achievement society,
Your identity is your achievement. If you give yourself the day off, you aren't just losing wages, you are losing your sense of purpose. You feel a profound existential guilt. The system has convinced you that any time not spent optimizing, networking, or producing is simply wasted time.
so you don't give yourself a day off because you are terrified of falling behind your own potential.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and it highlights the dark irony of the modern hustle. If you had a boss who called you at midnight and demanded you answer emails, who forced you to wear a biometric ring to track the efficiency of your sleep, and who told you that your relaxing weekend hobby needed to be monetized into a side hustle, you would call that tyranny.
You would quit immediately.
You would call the labor board. But when we do all of those exact same things to ourselves, we don't call it tyranny. We call it empowerment. We call it optimizing our lives. We literally buy books on how to do it better.
And that illusion of freedom is exactly why the Achievement Society is so incredibly stable. It neutralizes all collective resistance.
Because everyone is on their own.
Right. In the old system, the exploited factory workers could look at each other, recognize their shared physical exhaustion, identify their shared oppressor, form a union, and strike. They could demonstrate massive solidarity.
But today,
because we all view ourselves as individual, isolated entrepreneurs competing in a marketplace of potential, that class consciousness is structurally impossible.
because if you fail, if your startup goes under, or if you simply burn out from exhaustion, you don't blame the economic system.
You blame yourself.
The anchor turns inward instead of outward.
The outward aggression that historically fueled labor movements and revolutions becomes autoaggression. It becomes shame, anxiety, and depression. We are completely isolated in our self-exploitation. And Han notes something deeply counterintuitive about this process.
What's that?
The very first stage of burnout in the Achievement Society isn't exhaustion. It is euphoria.
Euphoria. Wait, really? That sounds entirely backwards. Usually we associate the path to burnout with a slow, grinding misery.
It does sound backwards until you examine the mechanics of self-actualization. Because we truly believe we are realizing our authentic selves, we throw ourselves passionately into our project.
We plunge into the work with absolute euphoria.
We start the new business, we take on the massive creative project, we sign up for the ultramarathon, believing we are basically manifesting our destiny. We run on the sheer adrenaline of our own infinite potential.
So the work doesn't feel like labor.
It feels like passion. We sustain this euphoric sprint right up until the exact moment of total physical, neurological, and psychological collapse. The enthusiasm itself is the trap.
It's like we are sprinting toward a mirage of self-actualization, and we don't stop until our legs literally give out beneath us.
Exactly.
And when we hit those inevitable human limits, what happens? Because human biology is finite, but the demands of this society are infinite. We are constantly told we can do more, but eventually the body says no. And this brings us to what Han diagnoses as the specific pathology of our era, a concept he calls the violence of positivity.
To frame this concept, Han looks at how the prevailing diseases of society have shifted over time. He argues that the 20th century, up until the end of the Cold War, was an immunological era.
Immunological. Okay, so how does an immune system actually function in this metaphor?
Well, in an immunological paradigm, the threat always comes from the outside. It is the other. Think of bacterial or viral infections.
Right.
The body's immune system defines a very clear boundary between self and non-self.
Right.
When it recognizes a foreign invader, a negativity, something that is not the body, it mounts a violent defense to attack it, repel it, and protect the self.
So the biological reality mirrored the geopolitical reality. Like, the 20th century was defined by clear borders. The Cold War was essentially a massive immunological reaction.
Exact. A clear division between us and them.
The capitalist West and the communist East. The threat was always external, and society was organized around defending against that foreign negativity.
Precisely. The societal defense mechanisms were all about exclusion, borders, and warding off the alien threat. But Han argues that the 21st century has undergone a paradigm shift. We have moved from an immunological age to a neurological age.
Because the world is globalized.
Yes, borders have become porous, information flows everywhere instantaneously. The other has largely disappeared as a systemic organizing principle. Consequently, our modern plagues aren't caused by a foreign invader from the outside.
So what are the defining diseases of our time?
They are neurological maladies, severe depression, ADHD, generalized anxiety disorders, and burnout syndrome.
And these aren't caused by an attack of the other. Han says they're caused by an excess of the same. They're caused by an excess of positivity. But, I mean, violence of positivity sounds like a complete oxymoron.
It does, yeah.
We are conditioned to think of violence as someone punching you or an army invading a country. How can positivity be violent?
Because we define violence purely in terms of negativity, deprivation, prohibition, physical harm, taking something away. But Han explains that the violence of positivity does not deprive, it saturates. It does not exclude, it exhausts.
So when a system is stripped of all negativity, meaning it is stripped of limits, boundaries, friction, and the ability to say no, it completely overwhelms the subject.
Exactly. We are bombarded with a constant, unfiltered stream of information, communication, stimuli, and just this relentless pressure to perform.
I think of it like being force-fed cake.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Cake is objectively positive. It is sweet, it is a reward, it is associated with celebration. But if someone straps you to a chair and force-feeds you 20 chocolate cakes, the sheer volume of that positivity becomes a violent act against your digestive system.
It will make you violently ill.
Yes, we are living in a society where the word no has been practically eradicated from our professional and social vocabulary. Like, can you take on this extra project? Yes, of course.
Can you answer this Slack message on a Sunday afternoon? Yes.
Can you optimize your morning routine to squeeze out 10 more minutes of productivity before dawn? Yes, you can.
And because the human immune system only evolved to react to negativity, to a distinct foreign threat, it is completely defenseless against this excess of positivity.
You don't have biological antibodies to fight back against career opportunities.
Right, or networking events, or technological conveniences. The threat doesn't register as a threat until it is way too late. So the system simply overheats.
So how does Han define depression in this context?
He defines it specifically as the failure to can anymore.
The failure to can.
Wow. It is the total catastrophic collapse of the achievement subject who can simply no longer measure up to the impossible, infinite standards they have internalized. The soul basically burns out from the friction of endless self-optimization.
The I can is finally crushed by the reality of human limitation.
Yes.
But if depression is the failure to can, then how we treat these issues as a culture is deeply flawed. If you look at modern corporate culture right now, the response to mass employee burnout isn't for leadership to say, wow, our expectations are fundamentally toxic and incompatible with human biology. We need to restructure the demands of this company.
Oh, definitely not.
The response is to roll out corporate wellness programs.
What's fascinating here is that corporate wellness initiatives are perhaps the most perfect, insidious embodiment of the achievement society's logic. It is what we might categorize as toxic positivity weaponized for productivity.
Exactly. Your company realizes everyone is exhausted, so HR gives you a free subscription to a meditation app, or they mandate a Friday afternoon Zoom yoga session.
Right, like that's going to fix the workload.
But the implicit goal of that yoga session isn't to give you genuine rest. It certainly isn't to encourage you to question the structural demands placed on you by the shareholders.
No, the stated goal is to make you more resilient.
Resilient. They want to help you manage your stress just enough so that you can return to your cubicle or your home office and handle an even heavier workload the following week. It takes the concept of rest and turns it into just another tool for optimization. You are optimizing your recovery to maximize your future output.
It is the complete instrumentalization of well-being. Even your attempts to heal are co-opted by the logic of achievement. You're expected to enthusiastically participate in your own therapeutic repair so you can get back on the treadmill as quickly as possible.
And if it doesn't work?
Well, the cruelty of this system becomes apparent when the wellness initiatives inevitably fail to cure structural exhaustion. If the mindfulness app doesn't cure your burnout, what happens?
Under the rules of the Achievement Society, that is just another personal failure added to your ledger.
Exactly. You didn't meditate hard enough. You didn't do the breathing exercises correctly. You didn't have the right positive mindset. The structural violence of the workload remains completely hidden behind the veneer of self-help and personal responsibility.
It is genuinely exhausting just talking about it. And it explains so much about the state of the modern attention span. Because if we are constantly saturated with this excess of positivity, with endless information and endless opportunities to achieve, our brains are basically stuck in overdrive.
We are drowning in stimuli.
Han connects this systemic exhaustion directly to how our attention has been fundamentally rewired. He argues that we are experiencing the death of deep attention and the rise of what he calls hyperattention.
And Han makes a brilliant, if somewhat unsettling, observation here regarding how we view our own cognition. We tend to view our ability to multitask, to answer a work email on our phone, while simultaneously listening to a podcast, watching a television show, and keeping an eye on a stock ticker as a sign of evolutionary progress.
Like, we think it makes us advanced, highly capable modern humans.
But Han argues the exact opposite is true. He says this scattered, restless state of awareness characterized by rapid task switching is actually a severe regression. It is a return to the cognitive state of an animal in the wild.
An animal in the wild. But we pride ourselves on being apex predators of information. How is multitasking returning us to a primal state?
Well, think about the daily reality of an animal in a forest or on the savanna. It can never afford to immerse itself completely in one single task.
Because it's too dangerous.
Right. If a deer is eating grass, it cannot simply enjoy the taste of the grass. It must simultaneously be scanning the horizon for predators, listening for snapping twigs, guarding its offspring, and keeping an eye on the movements of its rivals within the herd.
So its attention must be incredibly broad.
Broad, highly reactive, and constantly shifting. It is a state of perpetual vigilance required for basic survival in a hostile environment. It cannot afford to linger. It cannot afford to focus deeply on the texture of its food because it might be eaten by a lion while doing so.
That reframes our relationship with technology entirely. Our modern, tech-fueled multitasking isn't a superpower. We aren't highly evolved data processors. We're just surviving in a digital jungle, constantly scanning our screens for threats or dopamine hits or the next demand on our time from our boss.
We're acting exactly like prey.
Wow, we are acting like prey. We are terrified that if we look away from the feed, we will miss an opportunity or fall behind.
Precisely. We have adopted the hypervigilance of prey. And what this constant reactive hyperattention destroys is the uniquely human capacity for deep contemplative attention.
It destroys the ability to immerse oneself completely in a single object, thought, or aesthetic experience without that frantic underlying need to jump to the next stimulus.
Because we are so habituated to this rapid switching, we have developed a total agonizing intolerance for boredom.
Oh, absolutely.
The moment a gap appears in our day, a delayed train, a long line at the grocery store, a friend going to the restroom during dinner, we flee from the emptiness. We instantly pull out our smartphones to banish the silence.
We pave over every second of silence with digital distraction. I am entirely guilty of this. If I have 45 seconds in an elevator, I pull out my phone. I don't even know what I'm looking for. I just know I cannot stand to be alone with my own thoughts for less than a minute.
Han calls this the hell of the same.
The hell of the same. Because even though we are scrolling through a million different posts, tweets, and videos, it's all just a continuous, frictionless stream of easily consumable content.
It demands nothing from us.
It challenges none of our preconceptions, and it changes nothing within us.
It is an endless sequence of shallow stimuli that prevents any true integration or experience. You are consuming, but you are not experiencing. To counter this, Han champions what he calls profound boredom.
Profound boredom.
And he draws upon the work of the cultural critic and philosopher Walter Benjamin, who beautifully described boredom as the dream bird that hatches the egg of experience.
The dream bird that hatches the egg of experience. That is a stunning piece of imagery.
Yeah.
But how does that actually work in practice? I mean, how does being profoundly bored hatch anything other than frustration?
Well, Benjamin and Han are arguing that if you want a genuinely new idea, a profound insight into your own life, or a true aesthetic experience to emerge, it requires a period of incubation.
It requires the fertile emptiness of boredom.
Right. A new idea cannot arrive if the mind is already crammed full of external noise. Han states that if sleep is the high point of physical relaxation, deep boredom is the peak of mental relaxation.
But we eradicate it.
When we eradicate boredom by instantly reaching for our screens, we eradicate the very soil in which human creativity and deep thought grow. We are constantly awake, but we never dream.
I love the example Han uses regarding the French post-impressionist painter Paul Cézanne. He talks about Cézanne's process of painting landscapes, particularly his obsession with Mont Sainte-Victoire. Cézanne didn't just walk up to the mountain, snap a mental photo, sketch it out in 10 minutes, and move on to the next subject.
He would sit and stare at the landscape for hours.
Sometimes days. Before making a single mark, he allowed the visual information to slowly penetrate his consciousness. He lingered. It was a contemplative immersion that allowed him to see what he called the fragrance of things, to capture a geological depth and a truth about the landscape that a rapid, hyper-attentive glance could never perceive.
Cézanne's process is the absolute antithesis of the achievement society. He was not producing efficiently. He was engaging in the Vita Contemplativa, the contemplative life. Han uses another fascinating analogy to illustrate the difference between walking and dancing.
Okay, I like this. Walking versus dancing.
If you are highly intolerant of boredom and you're walking from point A to point B, the walking is purely instrumental. It is a means to an end.
If you get bored, you might just walk faster or jog to reach your destination sooner and end the activity.
But someone who can tolerate boredom, who can sink deeply into the present moment without needing a productive outcome or a destination, might transform that walking into a completely new movement. They might begin to dance.
And dancing is totally different.
Han points out that dancing is a purely purposeless aesthetic motion. It has no in order to. It doesn't get you to the grocery store any faster. Only human beings can dance because dancing requires a relationship with time that is entirely free from the compulsion to produce or achieve a goal.
So boredom isn't a bug in the human operating system. It's a vital feature that we've simply forgotten how to use, or that we've been conditioned to fear. When you pull out your phone in the grocery store line, you are actively killing the very space where a new idea or a new realization about your own life might have been born.
That's the tragic reality of it.
But I have to ask, why are we so afraid of it? When I sit in silence, I don't feel a dream bird hatching. I feel an immediate wave of anxiety. I start thinking about my to-do list, my emails of things I haven't achieved. We numb ourselves to avoid the discomfort of sitting with our own consciousness.
And that discomfort is exactly the threshold you have to cross. We fear the silence because the silence forces us to face our own internal labor camp. When the noise stops, you hear the voice of the master demanding why you aren't working. You feel the anxieties and the existential dread that you spend all day trying to outrun with busyness. But if you can push through that initial, highly uncomfortable withdrawal phase, if you can resist the urge to pick up the phone and achieve profound boredom, you open up a space for genuine contemplation.
Which brings us to a massive structural problem. If profound boredom and deep attention are so essential for the human spirit, how on earth do we carve out space for them in a world that is screaming at us to optimize every single second?
Because right now, the system is designed to extract value from every waking moment.
Exactly. So Han suggests that to find a solution, we actually need to look backward to ancient technologies of time. Specifically, he talks about the concept of the Sabbath.
And this requires us to make a crucial distinction between true inactivity, the Vita Contemplativa, and what we casually call leisure time or free time today.
Because they aren't the same thing at all.
Han argues that in our achievement society, leisure time is not actually free time at all. It is merely a derivative of work. It is a functional, instrumental pause.
Think about how we talk about weekends or vacations. You take the weekend off not to experience true stillness or to engage in divine contemplation, but to recharge your batteries.
And why are you recharging your batteries? So you can be a more efficient, productive worker when you return to the office on Monday morning. Your leisure serves the ultimate goal of production.
It's the work hard, play hard mentality. Even our play is aggressive, scheduled, and goal-oriented. We optimize our vacations. We cram in a dozen excursions so we can maximize the experience and post the photos as proof of our well-lived leisure time. It's exhausting.
Exactly. The logic of the factory floor has simply been extended to the beach resort. But true inactivity serves no external purpose. It is completely useless to the capitalist system.
So how does the Sabbath fit into this?
To explain the profound necessity of this useless time, Han draws on religious traditions, specifically referencing the Jewish theologian Abraham Joshua Heschel, who wrote a magnificent book called The Sabbath.
The Sabbath.
Heschel described the Sabbath not merely as a day off, but as a palace in time. The Sabbath is not a tool for recovering from work. It is a sanctuary erected against the totalization of work. It is a sacred space where the logic of production, commerce, and manipulation of the physical world is strictly and unequivocally forbidden from entering.
I found the theological interpretation Han uses here so compelling because it completely inverts how most people understand the creation story. Most of us are taught a very simple version of Genesis. God created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day, he was tired, so he took a break.
In that reading, rest is simply the absence of work. It's a recovery period.
Right. But Han references the medieval French rabbi Rashi, whose commentary in the book of Genesis flips that conventional understanding completely on its head. Rashi asks a profound question. After 6 days of creation, after the heavens and the earth and all the animals were made, what was the universe still missing?
It was missing minutia.
Minutia, a Hebrew word that translates to rest, tranquility, or peace.
So Rashi concludes that rest didn't simply follow the work of creation as an afterthought. Rest completed the creation.
Without the Sabbath, the creation of the universe was unfinished.
The act of doing absolutely nothing, of resting in contemplation, is elevated to divine essence. It is the pinnacle of existence, not just a pit stop on the way back to the factory.
Right, that is a massive paradigm shift. To view rest not as a biological necessity to prevent collapse, but as the actual crown jewel of existence. And the downstream effect of that shift fundamentally changes how we view time itself. Without these structural communal anchors of non-productive time, time loses all shape.
It just becomes a blur of sequential tasks.
Yeah.
Han discusses how rituals, ceremonies, and true festivals act as temporal architecture. They make time habitable. In a true festival, time doesn't just pass sequentially from one productive task to another in an endless line. During a ritual, time stands still. It becomes sacred.
Because sacred time is qualitatively different from profane labor time.
During a religious festival or a deep cultural ritual, a community gathers not to produce a commodity, not to network, not to extract value, but to relate to life itself. They engage in shared silence, or they celebrate purely for the sake of celebration. The time is lifted out of the economy of production.
But capitalism has colonized all of that. It cannot stand the existence of time that isn't generating profit. Capitalism looks at a festival or a sacred holiday and says, how can we monetize this?
Christmas becomes the most stressful retail quarter of the year.
A community gathering becomes a networking event where you're expected to hand out business cards. We lose the temporal architecture of sacred time, and we are left with nothing but endless, profane labor time. I mean, think about the most sacred biological rest of all, sleep.
Oh, sleep is the perfect example.
Sleep is the ultimate necessity for rest. You literally lose consciousness. But now, even sleep has been colonized. We have sleep trackers. We wear biometric rings and smartwatches to bed. We turn our unconscious hours into a data set.
We wake up, look at our sleep score on an app, and judge ourselves on how efficiently we rested.
We feel a sense of failure before our feet even hit the floor because our REM cycle wasn't optimal. We've turned doing absolutely nothing into a competitive sport.
When you measure your sleep to optimize your waking performance, you have allowed the logic of the factory to infiltrate your bed. You have invited the foreman into your unconscious mind.
It's terrifying when you put it like that.
You have entirely eliminated the threshold between the sacred and the profane. When all time becomes labor time, life becomes radically transient and fleeting. It becomes a frantic hamster wheel with no exit ramp.
This is why recognizing the sacred necessity of doing nothing isn't just a trendy wellness tip for burned-out executives. Han elevates inactivity to an urgent, non-negotiable necessity for both individual and collective survival.
Which brings us to the culmination of Han's entire argument. The diagnosis is clear. Our exhaustion is structural. Our self-exploitation is willing, and our capacity for deep thought has been destroyed by hyperattention.
So how do we actually fight back? Because, as we discussed earlier, storming the barricades doesn't work when you are both the prisoner and the guard. You can't overthrow yourself.
This is where Han introduces the concept of the politics of idleness, or resistance through inactivity. As we've established, traditional Marxist revolutions rely on a collective of oppressed workers rising up against a visible external oppressor. The workers strike, the factory halts, the owner loses money, and concessions are made.
But neoliberalism neutralizes this entirely by individualizing and atomizing us.
We don't see ourselves as an oppressed class sharing a common struggle. We see ourselves as isolated individuals who are just failing to hustle hard enough.
We are all walking around exhausted, looking at everyone else's curated LinkedIn and Instagram feeds, thinking everyone else is crushing it, and feeling deeply ashamed that we can't keep up.
Right.
You can't build a revolution out of depressed, isolated individuals who blame themselves for their own misery.
Exactly. The system is immune to traditional aggressive revolution. Furthermore, any active resistance you try to mount is almost immediately co-opted.
Like if you write an angry blog post about capitalism, it just becomes content that generates ad revenue for a tech conglomerate.
Or if you buy a t-shirt with an anti-work slogan, you are participating in consumerism. So if every action is co-opted into productivity or data for the attention economy, what is the alternative? Han argues that the ultimate rebellion today isn't action at all. It is a radical refusal.
Strategic idleness.
It is strategic idleness. It is the conscious, deliberate refusal to participate in the endless demand for optimization.
He brings up one of my absolute favorite literary characters. To illustrate this, Herman Melville's Bartleby the Scrivener.
Such a great example.
For those who haven't read the story, Bartleby works in a bustling 19th century Wall Street law office. His job is to manually copy legal documents. He's a cog in the financial machine. And one day, his boss, the lawyer, asks him to examine a document. Bartleby simply replies, "I would prefer not to."
I would prefer not to.
And he just stops. He doesn't yell. He doesn't break the copying machinery. He doesn't organize the union. He just quietly, politely, and immovably refuses to participate in the logic of production. His boss is completely baffled. He doesn't know how to handle an employee who doesn't fight back, but simply refuses to act. "I would prefer not to" becomes this impenetrable wall.
Bartleby exercises a sovereign no. In an achievement society that is constantly screaming at you to say yes to every opportunity, to overextend yourself, to constantly communicate, network, and produce, saying "I would prefer not to" is an act of profound political resistance.
It introduces negativity and friction back into a system that relies on frictionless positivity.
It withdraws the voluntary cooperation that the neoliberal system absolutely requires to function. The system cannot operate if the subjects simply decide to stop self-exploiting.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here because it is easy for a literary character in a novella to say, "I prefer not to." But if I tell my boss, "I prefer not to," when he emails me a spreadsheet to review on a Saturday morning, I get fired. I lose my health insurance. I can't pay my rent. How was Han suggesting we actually implement this practically without ruining our lives? Is this just about feeling better on a personal level by setting boundaries, or are the stakes higher?
The stakes could not possibly be higher, and it extends far beyond setting personal boundaries with your manager. Han explicitly connects the psychological burnout of the individual to the ecological burnout of the entire planet.
The ecological burnout.
They are not two separate crises, they are two symptoms of the exact same underlying disease. Both are driven by the logic of infinite extraction, boundless growth, and a total, arrogant refusal to acknowledge limits.
Oh, wow. I see where this is going.
The exact same mindset that drives a person to work 18-hour days chugging energy drinks until their nervous system collapses is the mindset that drives a multinational corporation to strip mine a rainforest, pollute a river, and extract fossil fuels until the global ecosystem collapses. It is the violent demand for maximization applied to both the human body and the earth.
So stopping the hamster wheel isn't just about saving your own sanity or getting a better night's sleep. It's about saving the world. By refusing to optimize our own lives, we are withdrawing our energy from the machine that is devouring the planet.
Han would argue that a politics of idleness is absolutely required to step off that path of global destruction. A contemplative revolution is necessary. We have to cultivate the capacity to be satisfied, we have to recognize when something is enough, and we have to learn how to engage with the world without needing to consume it, optimize it, or turn it into a resource.
And contemplative practices like deep boredom, the true observance of a Sabbath, engaging in purposeless art like dancing. They train us to see the world differently.
They break the spell of endless action. They teach us how to inhabit the earth without destroying it.
Think about what it means to actually enact this in daily life. Canceling a plan on a Friday night to stay home and do absolutely nothing. And I don't mean self-care, where you are doing a 10-step Korean skincare routine while listening to an educational podcast and wearing a red light therapy mask.
Right. That's just more work.
I mean just existing.
Yeah.
Sitting on the couch, staring out the window, and crucially, doing it without posting a photo of your tea on social media with the hashtag rest and recharge. Doing that might be the most radically anti-capitalist thing a person can do today.
You are starving the attention economy of your data.
You are reclaiming your time from the market. You are practicing sovereign unproductivity.
It is about carving out a space in your life that is not measurable, not visible to the algorithms, and not productive. A space where you belong entirely to yourself, free from the gaze of the digital panopticon and the internalized demands of the achievement society. It is about understanding that true freedom is not the ability to endlessly choose from a menu of consumer options, gig economy jobs, or career paths. True freedom is the capacity to pause.
We have covered massive ground today, traversing the complex landscape of Byung-Chul Han's philosophy. We started by looking at how society shifted from the oppressive, visible rules of thou shalt not in Foucault's disciplinary world to the seductive, toxic positivity of yes, we can in the modern achievement society.
We saw how this architectural and psychological shift tricked us into becoming our own worst taskmasters.
Leading to a culture of auto-exploitation where we willingly burn ourselves out in the name of self-realization, mistaking the euphoria of overwork for genuine passion.
We examined how this relentless, systemic demand for achievement strips our lives of the necessary negativity, the friction, the limits, the ability to say no, and the boredom that actually allows for deep thought and genuine human experience.
We saw how the barrage of constant stimuli and hyperattention reduces us to the state of anxious, vigilant animals in the wild, while deep attention and profound boredom open the door to true creativity and the Vita Contemplativa.
We explored the vital importance of the Sabbath, not as a battery recharge for more work, but as the creation of a palace in time that protects us from the totalization of work.
We discussed how the loss of rituals has left us adrift in a sea of meaningless passing time to the point where we even quantify our sleep. And finally, we discussed the radical necessity of strategic idleness, how channeling our inner Bartleby and refusing to constantly optimize is the ultimate political act required to prevent both our own neurological collapse and the ecological collapse of our planet.
It is a profound shift in perspective. The ultimate takeaway is to recognize that your exhaustion is not a personal failure. It is not a lack of resilience, it is not poor time management, and it is not a flaw in your character.
Your exhaustion is the highly predictable, natural consequence of a structural system that demands the impossible infinite growth from finite human beings.
So to you listening right now, let yourself off the hook.
The guilt you feel for wanting to sit on the couch and do nothing is just the internal labor camp guard talking. Fire him. Freedom isn't optimizing every second of your day. True freedom is the sovereign capacity to pause, to linger, and to just be. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, extending this philosophy into our immediate future.
We are standing on the precipice of a massive technological shift with the rise of artificial intelligence.
Exactly. AI is poised to automate vast swaths of the productive labor we spend our lives doing. Writing emails, analyzing spreadsheets, generating code, creating legal documents, the very things Bartleby the Scrivener did manually.
In theory, this should be the greatest liberation in human history.
It should usher in Han's Vita Contemplativa on a global scale. We should finally be free to just exist, to dance, to experience profound boredom. But consider the panic this is causing. Are we actually ready for a world where our labor isn't required? Or have we internalized the logic of the achievement society so deeply that we are terrified of a world without work?
When the machines finally take the treadmill away, will we embrace the stillness, or will we frantically build new, artificial treadmills just so we can keep exploiting ourselves?
Think about that the next time you find yourself with 5 empty minutes. Resist the urge to fill it and see what the silence reveals.